Daily Sacramento Kings talk has a new podcast home. It's the Matt George Podcast on Sactown Sports.
It's the final night before a long-anticipated NBA draft, a draft that some experts are calling one of the best. In fact, AJ DeBonsa called his shot in an interview earlier this week, saying he believes this will be the best draft class since the LeBron James draft. Only time will tell, but the anticipation is high. And here is our final Sactown Sports mock draft for you, heading into a pivotal draft night, especially here in Sacramento. I'm Matt George. Joining me, Chris Watkins from Sactown Sports. Of course, Chris, my producer and partner extraordinaire here on the Matt George Podcast. Chris, let's go pick by pick through this top 10 and talk our way through how we think this is going to go. Well, I mean, you can almost break this draft into sections, right? It's the top four, right? And then there's like the draft starting at 5, who's going to be there for the Kings at 7, and then from the Hawks to the Bucks, 8 through 10, that's where it's like, take your pick, right?
The vultures might come out.
I could see anybody going in that range to round out the top 10. Let's start with number 1 overall, my friend. Is it as simple as AJ DeBonsa versus Darren Peterson, or is there even a debate at this point? Because if it's me, I'm the Washington Wizards. I don't need 5 minutes to submit my pick. As soon as I'm on the clock, AJ DeBonsa is the pick for me.
Yeah, Matt, I really, really wanted to make this a bigger conversation. Like I tried to, convince myself that maybe there was a chance that Washington could go the Darren Peterson route. I don't really think there's a chance that Cam Boozer could go number 1. But ultimately, you're right. Like it just is AJ. When you have the college production that he put up, the size and the skill that he showed, the scoring ability, especially from the mid-range. Of course, he still has questions. He's not a perfect prospect, and that's where I'll maybe push against AJ a little bit, and it feels like maybe the LeBron, Dwayne Wade caliber he just isn't that complete of a prospect, when we're talking about that 03 draft class, but it is just that is not meaning to diminish how good this class can be, and how good AJ DeBonsa could be. I mean, he really has all of the tools to be a great NBA player, and he makes so much sense with the size, the stats that he was able to put up his one season at BYU. He is an incredible player, and it just makes all the sense in the world for him to go number 1.
He just has the potential to be that complete package player, although I do know there's some questions on the defensive end of the floor, but his natural scoring ability, his size, he's the one going back to when we were going through the the worst parts of the Kings season. I remember sitting there thinking, if AJ DeBonsa is at the other end of this, it's worth it. Well, He's not going to be for the Kings, but I think he's going to be for the Washington Wizards. That is to say, though, I wouldn't be shocked, Chris, if Darren Peterson does go number 1.
Really, I think at this point I would be. I think overall, if we were talking normal circumstances, Matt, I think absolutely. Like if we're just talking raw basketball, Darren Peterson has maybe the best case to go number 1. I mean, he really was just an effortless scorer at Kansas, and with all of the questions of his injury, like at the very worst, you can say that he played through those injuries and still was able to put up absolutely ridiculous, ungodly numbers and look as effortless as many draft experts have said he's the most effortless scorer they've seen since Kevin Durant as a prospect. And I think that's incredibly true. He is just as silky smooth of a scorer as you're going to find as a prospect. And, if he were AJ DeBonsa's size and still had the silky smooth offensive game he has, I think he goes number 1, no question. And we're maybe talking about one of the greatest prospects that we've ever seen. But I honestly think that when you factor in all of the questions about his potential health and, just the love of the game question, I guess, that doesn't exist, or you don't have to question with a Cam Boozer or with an AJ DeBonsa, to me is ultimately why, because this is a stacked draft class, he just can't go number 1, because there are so many other great prospects that don't have other questions as big as Darren Peterson. But that's not to say from a pure basketball standpoint, he definitely should be considered at this number 1 pick, no doubt.
So we're both in agreement that it's going to be AJ DeBonsa number 1 overall. Number 2, I go back and forth with this spot, Chris, because and it's not so much who they pick, it's the Jazz being in the spot. Like, I loathe the fact that the Jazz are there. I can't stand it. It pisses me off. But at the same time, the Jazz are the outlier team in that top 4 because they're a team that's ready to compete right now, especially after the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade they made at the trade deadline. So I think that's why, plus the Carlos Boozer connection to the Utah Jazz organization. That's why all of a sudden Cam Boozer to the Utah Jazz is picking up a lot of steam, because even though Cam is the youngest prospect out of this group, which is crazy to say, it feels like he's 22 the way people talk about him, he does seem to be the most like immediate impact type player in a lot of people's minds. Now, the Jazz already have a loaded front court, so I don't know how they'd figure out that rotation and who gets the minutes and who doesn't. But Cam Boozer is picking up a lot of steam in number 2. That being said, I still think the pick should be Darren Peterson. But a week ago, if you would have told me Cam Boozer number 2, I would have been like, no, he's going to go 3 to Memphis. Now it really seems like on draft night, Cam Boozer could be wearing a Utah Jazz hat.
Matt, I'm there. I'm fully there. I think at this point, I would be surprised if Cam Boozer doesn't go number 2. I think all of the reasons that I just kind of said about the questions of Aaron Peterson. I think it's when you are in this loaded of a top end draft class, the guys who have the least amount of questions might be the ones who rise. You know, you just can't mess up when you have an opportunity like this in a loaded draft class, and when you have very real questions about whether Darren Peterson is going to be able to potentially get over this cramping issue or the whatever that you want to attribute what happened his season at Kansas to. Cam Boozer, Matt, I mean, I don't know if a perfect college basketball season exists, but if it does, Cam Boozer had it. I mean, all he was missing was if he won the national title, I legitimately think there could have been a conversation about Cam Boozer being number 1 just from a pure narrative perspective. People would have said, look, this guy is just a winner. I think he won 2 California State basketball championships, and then to come in his freshman season at Duke, and if he were to have a run, he could have potentially been in that conversation for number 1. And I just think when you've had this long to look at this decision and mull over this decision like Danny Ainge has, I just think you go with the guy who's got the insane pedigree. All the offensive and defensive, frankly, advanced metrics are top of the class. And you know, I think there is some question on how many bigs they want to load up on, but if you're going to say that every single minute Cam Boozer is going to be paired next to either Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., or Walker Kessler, that's like a perfect situation for him to thrive in. Every question I have about his size, or, you know, him being an undersized 4 and what can he kind of not do on both ends of the floor because of his size and, you know, the style of play that he has, I think are pretty much erased by the ability to play next to those guys. So I think it makes a lot of basketball sense for him to go number 2. I think it makes a lot of optic sense for him to go to number 2. And, you know, I think if that's where it's going to be, I think the Memphis Grizzlies should throw a parade. Like it is almost like a Luka Doncic type situation if you're Memphis and you feel like Darren Peterson somehow falls into your lap at number 3. I mean, I was really thinking about it earlier, and not to just jump ahead to 3, but Darren Peterson is a weird case where it's a question at 1, but at 3 it's an absolute steal. And so I think you just have to be thrilled if you're Memphis and Darren Peterson fall into your lap.
See, what I like about this, because before we solidify our number 2 pick, what I like about this is the way that I feel like everybody is happy, because I don't think Cam Boozer would be happy in Memphis playing meaningless basketball. I don't think the Utah Jazz necessarily would be happy with a player that, while Darren Peterson, I think, can be a positive impact right away, I really do believe Cam Boozer is the guy that you can slot in and put that team in the conversation for maybe making a push for a top 4 seed in the Western Conference right away, depending upon how well they gel and mesh together and how healthy they're able to stay. And then you just illustrated, like, if the Memphis Grizzlies are sitting there at 3 and all of a sudden this generational scorer that they can give him all the time and as much of a green light as he needs right away, assuming they're moving on from John Morant, which I still think will be the case. I mean, hey, come on into Memphis.
Man, that could be a crazy offensive backcourt, though.
That's true. If the 2 of them stay together, it could be wild. But if they move on from Ja, regardless, it's, hey, feel free to chuck 25 shots a game, man. Just go and get yours, get your points, and let's put on a show here while we kind of build around you in Memphis. I feel like all the boxes are checked in this scenario with Cam Boozer going 2 and Darren Peterson number 3. So dare I say this is like we'll see if it actually happens and if really the Jazz are brave enough to take Cam over Darren Peterson. But if it happens, this is almost like the people's choice, I think, for the top 3 is Cam going 2 and Darren Peterson 3.
Yeah, and I mean, that's almost why it very well might not happen, because there's a very good chance that all of this is just, hey, we've been sitting here for 2 months now or a month and a half knowing the draft order. And we've already known pretty much, like you said at the start of this, who the top 4 is, who the next are going to be. And there's a very real chance that all of this is just us trying to stir up, us as a collective, us trying to stir up some sort of narrative to talk about the top of this draft, because we know who the characters are going to be at the end of the day. And for the most part, it seems like we know who 1 and 4 are going to be. It's just a matter of what happens, or potentially how far Darren Peterson could fall, I guess, is another narrative that I think, secretly the head execs are kind of hoping they can tap into a little bit.
I don't think anybody has it. So let's for the sake of this exercise, let's lock in AJ number 1. Let's do Cam Boozer number 2, Darren Peterson number 3, just to try and manifest it. Is there anybody in a more, there are obviously more beneficial positions than number 4, but I feel like, man, it's smooth sailing for the Chicago Bulls on draft night. Hey, whoever's there out of that top 4 at 4, we're taking him. Like, is there any chance, Chris, any chance at all that, assuming Caleb Wilson is there, or one of the 3 or above him drops if someone decides to take Caleb Wilson early, is there any chance that the Chicago Bulls do something crazy here and go for one of these guards? They're just going to take whoever's left of that top 4, right? It's an easy draft night.
Yeah. It is the easiest pick I can imagine. It's almost like, in a weird way, again, I know you said like the draft kind of resets at 5, but in a weird way, if you're 4, you have to feel like it's almost the first pick again, because you know what it's going to be. And it is just no stress. Like, it really is. If you're the Chicago Bulls, no one's going to blame you if this doesn't work out. It's not as if you're reaching for anybody. This is the consensus 4th pick. It's the position that makes the most sense. It's not as if you're potentially taking a risk on a small guard or something like that. Like, this is a long forward who, put up numbers defensively. I think people have some overall questions about where his real defensive ability is at, but nonetheless, he is a freakish athlete who shows potential to have, Giannis-like abilities in the NBA. And I think that's just not something you could ever pass on, especially when, again, the next crop of guys are a bunch of point guards or just guards in general that don't provide the elite size that Caleb Wilson can provide.
Is there, like, I asked Brendan Nunez this earlier today on the Matt and Kayla show. Is there anybody you think even remotely threatening a jump into the top 4 to push anybody down? Like, is it Acuff, Wagler, Brown Jr.? Like, is there anybody that we think should even be considered like a 5% chance as a threat to disrupt that top 4? Or is it's going to be that top 4?
I can't see the 4. I could maybe see there being a surprise at 5, but at 4, it just feels like there's been no talk of Darius Acuff potentially moving up. And to me, Acuff would probably be the one if you were to circle somebody who a GM could potentially fall in love with their superstar potential. Again, like there's some whispers of Nate Ahmet potentially raising as high as 5, but it just feels like there's no way that could potentially go to as high as 4. Like we would have, I think Chicago just restarted their front office. It would be pretty incredible for them to start it off with, just going completely off the board.
And if you were planning on doing that, why would you not cash in on the King's ransom that you could get for anybody to move into that top 4 to trade down? So
I don't know if that was that pun intended. Did you intend to say King's ransom there? Because quite literally, the Kings would offer. I would hope if the 4th pick is being offered, I would hope the Kings would be willing to throw whatever they possibly could to move.
I think you'd be putting the 7 and multiple firsts on top of that on the table if you really felt you had a chance to move up to 4, but I don't think the Bulls would go anywhere. So our top 4, we have AJ number 1, we have Cam Boozer number 2, Darren Peterson number 3, Caleb Wilson number 4. Now at number 5, assuming the LA Clippers keep this pick, although the Clippers are rumored to potentially be a third team in a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade if it involves the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks and rerouting Jaylen Brown to the Clippers, and the Bucks would get 5 in this year's draft. That would throw a big wrench into things, because if the Bucks have the 5th pick, who the hell knows what they're going to do? Maybe they go A-Cuff because they're going for a swing. That would change some things. But assuming, because we can't predict that, assuming the LA Clippers are remaining at 5 on draft night, we've seen Keaton Wagler connected to them so much because of the Darius Garland stuff. But now all of a sudden, Michael Brown Jr. at 5 has picked up a lot of momentum. Yeah. Are we going with what we think it's going to be based off of how the last month has gone with Keaton Wagler, or do we think Brown Jr. might sneak in and snatch that top guard spot away?
Yeah, this is one where I just don't really have any feel for it. I mean, you know, this is the like you said, I mean, it feels like the Clippers, very intentionally are being very loose with what their intentions are going to be. Do they want to move back? Do they want to use this very rare blessing of an this is Indiana's pick. They're not supposed to have. They got this from the Zubac trade in the middle of the year. This was not necessarily in their long-term plans at the start of the season, and so it'd be pretty tough to imagine them. I guess you could say getting greedy and trying to cash in even more on that. So I'll keep them at 5, and it does feel like to me Michael Brown is the one that makes more sense to me. He's the one that offers, some say, the highest potential. I don't necessarily see it in terms of, you know, again, some people think that he can be the best player in this draft. I think that that's a little wish casting. I think that that's, you know, a little bit of more so hope and belief that he can exceed things that he's shown on tape. I think what he has shown is to be a really good, maybe even the best shooter in this draft in terms of, like, you know, just off ball and his ability to really get hot. I think that's the thing that people really get excited by. He has definitely ability to play on ball. And so I think maybe that combination of elite shooting and potential to also be an on ball player, I feel like Michael Brown's the one that makes the most sense. Keaton Wagler would be quite a project for them, but that again, you can kind of stash his development away in the back end, in terms of, they're definitely looking to compete. And I don't necessarily know if Keaton Wagler, if his development would necessarily be the thing that they're hoping for to take them over the next level.
See, I think it makes the most sense for the LA Clippers to absolutely shop the you-know-what out of this pick. Just take calls almost every second of those 5 minutes that you're on the clock. Just take call after call and just try and create a bidding war for potentially this 5th spot and manipulate, because I don't think there is a perfect pick for the LA Clippers in this range. I've heard multiple people say the Clippers should not take Darius Garland into account when making a selection here, which on the surface I understand, take the talent over the fit. But after just trading for Darius Garland and using James Harden to get Darius Garland, I have a hard time believing the Clippers would just go a few months later, just go, we'll draft another point guard and not care. Like, I think if the Clippers stay at 5, Keaton Wagler will be the pick, simply because you can use him as a combo guard. You can run him off ball, but he can also control the basketball a little bit while Keaton Wagler's out of the game. And I know they like the versatility and the size that Wagler presents and how switchable he could be on the defensive side of the ball. So I think the reason why he's been if there's a consensus at that 5th spot, there's a reason why he's been that guy for so long. It just makes a lot of sense. He checks a lot of boxes, and he could straight up be, outside of Darren Peterson, the best guard in this draft anyway that fits better for the Clippers. So I'm expecting if the Clippers pick at 5, Keaton Wagler will be the selection. But if Michael Brown Jr. comes out of nowhere and suddenly is taken 5, that'd be a pretty interesting story on draft night.
Yeah, and I think the Clippers tend to Yeah, it like you said, I think it does act, especially with how you lay it out, you can definitely view it as getting greedy, or you're playing with house money. And so, I think the Clippers in a situation where, again, I don't know if they're ever going to be, especially not in this Kawhi era, in a situation to kind of capitalize on this good of an asset, whether they take a Wagler or Brown, or cash it in for a potential piece that could help them try and salvage whatever again is left of this Kawhi Leonard era. But ultimately, I think it's going to be whoever they feel like is the best long-term fit. It does feel like in general, if you're the Clippers, Matt, like you should just go with whoever, they always say best player available, but truly like go for the home run swing here. If you're the Clippers, I don't see why you wouldn't just trust whoever it is that your scouts evaluated and just straight swing for potential. I don't think you, again, to me, it feels like this is a spot for the Clippers to really try and build for the future a little bit.
There is a little pressure tied to this pick too, because while a lot of their draft picks in the future are tied up in other deals, especially like the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander deal is still being so. Who knows if they'll have as high of a pick as this again for at least the foreseeable future. But who knows with this new draft lottery system? I guess it could. Anything could happen. So, but there is a little pressure too. They would, if this is going to be their last high pick for a while, they definitely do want to get it right. But that could be all the more reason to, like you're talking about, say, hey, swing for the fences. So if we get a player like a Michael Brown Jr., who is a risk, but he turns out to be the star we're looking for, then who cares about that pick that went an SGA trade? Because we got Michael Brown Jr. in a deal with the Pacers that we wouldn't have been in that position anyway if we hadn't traded away if it's a Zubac. Right. So, well, it'll be interesting. So you and I are kind of, I guess, split here, because I think the safer pick and the pick that makes the more sense for them is Wagler. You seem to think the higher upside swing is Michael Brown Jr. So where do we want to go here as a consensus?
I think we can go Wagler. I think we'll go Wagler here, just because I think also a lot more mocks have Brown available to these next couple teams. So I think for conversation's sake, it might be better to keep him available.
Brooklyn at 6. They have the potential to really, I guess, ruin the Sacramento Kings plans. But they've got some wild ideas of their own, including potentially Nate Ament. We heard rumors of a Day Mara, although I don't necessarily subscribe to that. Even the Nate Ament thing makes me a little bit curious. I know Darius Acuff Jr. would make a lot of sense for the Brooklyn Nets, who need talent right now, but they just drafted a boatload of guards earlier, or going back to last draft. But then why would we use that as an argument for them to not take Darius Acuff Jr., but they then take Michael Brown Jr.? Like, you can't pick one over the other, right? Either they don't want a guard, so they don't take either of those guys, or they do want a guard and they just think Michael Brown Jr. is better than Darius Acuff. Maybe they like him more for Jordi Fernandez and the style that they're trying to play. I genuinely have no idea what the Brooklyn Nets are going to do at 6. I know the consensus as of late is starting to shift to the Kings really believe that Darius Acuff Jr. is going to be there for them at 7. Honestly, the Brooklyn Nets, I'm going to be locked into those 5 minutes and locked into Twitter on draft night tomorrow, because I have no freaking clue what the Brooklyn Nets are going to do.
Matt, and we should also add that right before we started recording, the Brooklyn Nets acquired Julius Randle. And so you can throw that into the equation of everything. And when you think about what their roster looks like now, I mean, it's Randle at the 4, you have Michael Porter Jr. at the 3, and so I don't know if that necessarily means that a guy like Nate Ament is out of the conversation. That kind of does muck up their forward situation a little bit. Of course, they trade Nick Claxton. That opens up the center position. I don't think, again, if Adai Mara, maybe. But Brooklyn, again, is just in this really weird spot where it feels like they can kind of do anything. And with them last year showing that they're very willing to go unconventional. They 4 guards in the first round last year. Why not take a 5th? Like, if they don't feel like any of those guys really worked out, I don't see why it's impossible for them to take a guy like Darius Acuff here as well. Like, I think that they just kind of need good players, and Julius Randle and Michael Porter Jr. aren't already aren't the best defenders out there, so I don't necessarily know if they're even thinking about defense and would be concerned with Acuff on that side of the floor. So again, it's not really helpful, but it actually feels like Brooklyn can go truly just dart throw and go anywhere with this pick.
In my mind, like,
which for the Kings is
actually,
terrifying.
Right, exactly. But you can almost talk about the 6 the same way we talk about the 7. and to sum it up for our show today, is the question simple. Like, do we think Darius Acuff Jr. is going to be there at 7 or don't we? Because if the answer is no, then I think Brooklyn's taking him at 6. If the answer is yes, then Brooklyn's going in a different route, and who knows what the hell route that's going to be. But it really comes down to that. Like, I think if the Nets will decide whether or not Darius Acuff Jr. is a king, not the Kings. It almost seems like Brooklyn is going to be the one to ultimately make that decision. And maybe they try a last-ditch effort to try and force the Kings to use, I don't know, a second-round pick or a couple second-rounders to move up one spot in order to secure Darius Acuff Jr. And I don't know if Scott Perry would call their bluff and go, bet, like, go ahead and take Darius then, and we'll take Kingston Flemings at 7. I don't know if that's how it's going to play out, but Brooklyn will decide, I think, what the Sacramento Kings do at 6.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Kings, it's a terrifying spot. Like, you just sit there for those 5 minutes and you agonize. And, I guess maybe in this situation, if you're the Kings, you aren't agonize. It depends how high they really are on Kingston Fleming. We know from reports that the Kings, by all accounts, are incredibly high on Darius Acuff. If they feel great or even just a smidge as good about Kingston Fleming, then they aren't sweating. They're looking at 5. Both of those guys go past 5, and they're saying, okay, that's great. No matter what, we have a point guard of the future that we feel very confident in. It's just, yeah. I mean, I really, if you're looking for me to make this pick, Matt, I have no idea. Like, Brooklyn. Again, I've seen Nate Ament up there. I think that makes sense in the sense of he is a forward, and I think those guys, if you can nail one of those forward positions, it's incredibly valuable, and he definitely showed a lot of ability in high school, and not so much that he wanted to show in his one season at Tennessee. I've heard Braden Burry's potentially going as high as this. A lot of people, he is somebody a lot of people are really, really high on his potential. He seems like a safe pick potentially. Maybe, as I mentioned, all of the guys they do have, Braden Burry's really doesn't fit as a point guard, which is, again, the position they took 4 of last year. He's not Michael Porter Jr. at the 3. He's not Julius Randle at the 4. And so, again, if you're trying to figure roster construction wise, I guess you could say a guy like Braden Burry's makes sense here. Or, if Michael Brown is truly still on the board here, I think Michael Brown, if they view him as an off-ball player, potentially I think that could also make sense for him. So again, Matt, I'm not gonna pinpoint any of these guys, but I'm gonna tell you that there's many ways that the Brooklyn Nets can go, and I think the pie chart is split about as evenly as you can get.
I almost want to backtrack to 5 really quickly, because I feel like Kings fans should be rooting for the Clippers to take Michael Brown Jr. at 5. I think Kings fans should root for Michael Brown Jr. to go to the Clippers at 5, because I think if Keaton Wagler is there at 6, I think that's an easy pick for Brooklyn. If Keaton Wagler goes 5, like so many expect, then Brooklyn has their pick of the litter. So I almost want I know we have for this exercise Keaton Wagler going 5, but if Michael Brown Jr. goes 5, I think that actually is that's really good for the Kings and their hopes of Darius Acuff Jr. landing at 7. If it's Keaton Wagler at 5, then Brooklyn could do whatever the hell they want. And at that point, it's a crazy preference between all of these point guards that are available to them. For the sake of this exercise, do you want to lock in Wagler at 5 and Michael Brown Jr. at 6 and give the Kings what we think they want? Or do we want to go chaos and say Acuff goes 6 and then Sacramento's forced to pivot?
See, in my mind, chaos is the Kings actually having to put pen to paper and say, yes, we definitively like Darius Acuff more than Kingston Fleming. To me, that is way more interesting than them being able to fall into the, if they take Kingston Fleming, Matt, they're never going to admit anything about Darius Acuff Jr. If Darius Acuff Jr. goes 5th or 6th, like they will say Kingston Fleming was the guy that they had circled the entire time and they loved him through the process. You saw the report that Matt George, wonderful Sactown Sports host, put out where we met with his family in San Antonio. Yeah, so I think that the Kings already have done their due diligence in making sure that they've covered their back on a lot of this stuff. But yeah, again, to me, the way more interesting and frankly, like, you know, Scott Perry, like I want to see it, because I want to see you really, really definitively say, I think Darius Acuff's defense is not really a concern. And even though I preach and will at every turn say these principles, and most of which are about being defensive minded and leadership and taking accountability, all of which, if you just want to really focus on Darius Acuff's defense, like he's just not doing by putting on tape what he did. That is not being accountable. That is not obviously being team oriented. That is not being ahead of a snake. That is not just, you know, if you're going to demand a certain amount of touches on the offensive end, you have to give a certain amount of effort on the defensive end. So again, I can go all day on that, but I just think at the end of the day, to me, the more interesting decision would be Scott Perry having to say, no, I like Darius Acuff definitively more than I like Kingston Fleming.
So let's go Michael Brown Jr. then at 6. Now, I personally believe if Darius Acuff is there at 7, the Sacramento Kings are going to select him. I just feel very, very confident with that. I think all signs point to that. I think it makes a lot of sense for that to be the case. So that I would be shocked that you talk about chaos. Can you imagine though if Flemings and Acuff are there and the Kings go Flemings? Can you imagine?
I can't stop imagining, Matt.
I mean, I think you're rooting for that almost. That would throw a massive curveball in the draft, because if Darius Acuff Jr. is there at 7, you're going to have people on social media going, why even put the Kings on the clock? Just let them pick at 7 and let the Atlanta Hawks go. Like, a lot of people are going to be expecting if Acuff Jr. is there at 7, there's no reason to even waste any time. So if the Kings were to have the choice, can you imagine? You talked about if Acuff goes 5, for example, or 6, and the Kings go with Flemings, like you said, they're naturally going to say like, no, it's been Kingston the entire time, and that's what they should do. Imagine if, again, Flemings and Acuff are there and they still go Flemings. That there is Scott Perry. You got some splaining to do, I think, in that case, but I think a lot of people would also like it.
Walk with me, Matt. Like, let me walk you through the galaxy brain that could be what you're explaining right now. Is that Scott Perry this whole time has just been just so okay with it being out there that Darius Acuff Jr. and the Kings are linked, whether it be from the King side, whether it be from Acuff and his agents, whether it be the dad connection, whether it be the John Calipari sitting when his team was playing in San Jose and sitting courtside at a Kings, whatever you want to make the connection to Darius Acuff and the Kings, Scott Perry has been more than okay with that being out there. And this mock draft season that we've been in, every single mock draft you open is Darius Acuff to the Kings. And I think every single national reporter just says, yeah, we all know, like, it's all linked. It's just all the, there was a first thread and we're just continually following that thread. And I think it's been incredibly suspiciously quiet on the Kingston Flemings front. And I think if you're Scott Perry, you're more than willing to have everyone in the league think, well, if Darius Acuff gets to 7, he's gone. So if we want Darius Acuff, he's got to go 6, he's got to go 5. And so the Kings, what I'm saying more so is the Kings are pretty much begging the league to take Darius Acuff off of the board so that Kingston Flemings, because as we just discussed with Brooklyn and with the Clippers, Kingston Flemings is not in that conversation. Darius Acuff is potentially in that conversation. So as long as Scott Perry can guarantee in this galaxy brain situation that Kingston Flemings is going to be at 7, he's happy. And the way to do that is to make people really focus on, okay, let's make sure Acuff is off the board. And so that is my galaxy brain.
That would be a masterclass of market and draft manipulation by Scott Perry if that were the case. That being said,
Scott Perry's a smart man. You know, he knows media. He was once a media member. You know, he understands how this thing works and how it can be manipulated. So I just think that it's one of those things that it's been too weird, that it's been too linked. You know.
I don't see it, but if it happened, man, that'd be crazy. Brain. And we'll say Chris Watkins snuffed it out first. If it does happen, Chris Watkins snuffed it out first. I think if Darius Acuff is there at 7, the Kings are taking him at 7. But if they chose Flemings,
with all that said, I agree.
If they chose Flemings over Acuff Jr. with both of them being available, that would break a lot of brains in the NBA, and I think Scott Perry would have a field day with that. But he better not be wrong. He better not be wrong in that sense.
I would love it. I mean, I would really, really love it. I think I would love what it symbolizes. And yeah, I mean, I do think from, from a Kings fan perspective, I could imagine it being a pretty terrifying thing because it is pretty openly, or it is pretty much opening you up for criticism. Like you are openly, again, making a decision. I think anytime you are putting your stamp on something and definitively saying, I like this more than this in that kind of fashion, especially when it is so widely considered that Darius Acuff would be the pick there. I mean, that is going to be headline news, especially again, when we're as a collective media looking for what is going to be the thing that we don't expect from this draft, because we are all talking about how great it's going to be, but what is the thing that we don't know it's going to be?
The thing is, if you're a Kingston Flemings fan, if the Kings don't take Flemings at 7, I don't know where he goes. Alan Stiles said today on the air he's heard that the Bucks at 10 are Flemings' floor.
Yes.
So it doesn't sound like Flemings is going to fall that far in any kind of trade down scenario where the Kings could get Kingston Flemings. But like, let's say Darius Acuff Jr. goes to the Kings at 7 in this mock draft.
We'll put him there.
I don't think we should just pencil in Kingston Flemings to go 8 to the Atlanta Hawks.
No.
Like this is where I think the Atlanta Hawks are in a great position to go Ade Mara here at number 8. They need a big man. It makes a lot of sense for them to go that route. Plus, them being one pick ahead of the Dallas Mavericks, who just went out and got Michigan's head coach, Ade Mara's head coach at Michigan, who just won a national championship, now is the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks. I think that plays a factor into this too. So I would not be surprised at all to see Mara go number 8 to Atlanta.
Yeah. Mara is an interesting one. He's definitely like the biggest name in terms of like how high will he rise. I think, like you said, Dallas now especially feels like the furthest that he'll fall. And yeah, I mean, to me, in this kind of situation, Dallas is calling up at 8 and trying to move up, or I'm sorry, at 9 and trying to move up to 8 to secure Mara. That would be my guess. I don't know how committed Atlanta is to Mara, but I think there's a ton of good prospects still out there for Atlanta. And if I were them, I would completely be in the mode of, okay, who is interested in Flemings? Who is interested in potentially Nate Ahmet or more? Like I'm just scouring the market the same way you talked about the Clippers at 5 there. That's pretty much how I'm treating 8 with Atlanta. I am just looking at this and saying, who wants whatever is left of this crop here?
You don't subscribe to the Braden Burries Dallas Mavericks connection of Clutch wanting him to go there, and do you subscribe to that at all?
It makes sense. It does make a lot of sense, and we know Rich Paul's very well connected in that manner. He does make a lot of sense for Dallas as a combo guard. Yeah, I mean, that to me does make a lot of sense. I think, if not for the hiring of the Michigan coach today, I think that there's pretty much no link to Amara going to Dallas. So that to me feels like a really, really good spot. I mean, at least I haven't seen a lot of Mara to Dallas, but I think before today, I think that Mara to Atlanta does make sense.
For the sake of this, because we're running out of time here, let's say Mara Atlanta 8, let's say Burries Dallas 9, then 10 the Milwaukee Bucks pretty much have their pick, right? Do they want to go with Yaxel Lendeborg, who I think is perfect for the Warriors at 11, or the Thunder at 12? I think it would make a ton of sense for the Milwaukee Bucks, who are moving on from Giannis. Could happen at any moment. For them to go like a Nate Ahmet and take a big upside swing on the boom or bust prospect that is Nate Ahmet. But they could also stun all of us. They could go a Cameron Carr. They could go a Phylon Jr. They could go a Steinbach. And I don't think anybody would be stunned necessarily. So the Bucks are a complete wild card at 10 to me. Or like we've talked about, Kingston Flemings is his floor is 10. So they just simply go Kingston Flemings and feel like they made out with one of the best point guards in this draft, all the way falling to them at 10. So I have no clue what the Bucks are going to do at 10.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I mean, based off of the caliber of player that I think Kingston Flemings is, I would assume that whoever is below in or like lower in this draft is probably calling up immediately and saying, I can't believe Kingston Flemings is still available. We want to call in and make this pick. Because honestly, Matt, the truth is, if we're just talking straight fit, if Kingston Flemings doesn't go 10, he's not going 11 to Golden State, obviously Steph Curry. He's not going 12 to OKC, obviously Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The next logical spot is Miami at 13. But then you have the Hornets, who obviously have LaMelo Ball, maybe Chicago at 15. And so we're talking about a potential Kingston Flemings range of like 5 to 15, like that out of the lottery. That's where Kingston Flemings' agent is, probably telling Kingston like, oh yeah, enjoy the night, whatever. But that guy has got to be hitting the phones furiously, trying to find as many fallbacks as possible. Because yeah, if the Kings don't take him at 7, I think when you're that caliber of player, teams are going to call up and you'll still be a top 10 pick, but you have to try and line up those teams and let them know like Kingston's healthy and he is very willing to come play for you or whatever it is. Like that is a very potential scary situation for Kingston Flemings.
So our top 10 in the final Sactown Sports mock draft before draft night. We got AJ Debonsa, number 1, Cam Boozer, number 2, Darren Peterson, 3, Caleb Wilson, 4, Keaton Wagler, 5, Michael Brown Jr., 6 to the Brooklyn Nets. The Kings go Darius Acuff Jr. at 7, Ade Mara to the Atlanta Hawks at 8, Braden Burries 9 to the Dallas Mavericks, and then Kingston Flemings finds a home at 10 to the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll see how right we are. Maybe 100%. We're way off base. Who knows with this draft class, but I'm excited. I'm excited to watch it with you, Chris, tomorrow night inside the Golden One Center. We'll see what the Kings and all these other teams do. Let chaos ensue. I can't wait, man. I'm ready for it. I'm tired of talking about it. Let's actually see it.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. This is going to be a great draft and an exciting night, and hopefully, a night that we can all remember for many different fan bases. But here in Sacramento, I think this, again, hopefully has potential to be a night to be remembered.
Tune in to the Matt George podcast tomorrow. An episode will drop either during the first round, the late stages of the first round, if something crazy happens, or after the first round and Scott Perry's end of the first round draft press conference. Plus, we have a chance to be able to interview whoever the Kings select at 7 tomorrow, as well as Sacramento media. So keep an eye out for that, as well as SactownSports.com all day long on Sactown Sports AM 1140 on your radio dial. You can listen to wall-to-wall coverage of the draft on your home of the Sacramento Kings. Chris, appreciate you. Let's get this party started.